All right, it's 7 o'clock, and this is and Happy New Year, everybody. This is the first meeting of the Farragut Board of Mayor and Aldermen for the year 2013. We will start by invocation, and then would the Boy Scouts here like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? So let's all rise for invocation tonight to be given by Larry Boyles, Associate Pastor of First Baptist Concord.
Would you pray together? Father, we thank you for the many blessings that you've given us, and we thank you that we can reflect back on this past year and see your hand at work in so many ways. We thank you for the community that you allow us to live in. And as we look forward to a new year, God, we ask for your continued guidance, for your continued blessing as we seek to serve you and serve the people in this community. For it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Larry. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. This is really straightforward, so anybody propose to accept it as it is?
Motion to accept it. I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next item is Mayor's report, and I have two things. One is, I just got this from the National League of Cities. It's a certificate of membership. The National League of Cities honors the town of Farragut, Tennessee for 30 years of membership and dedicated service in the shaping and advocating of national municipal policy and helping to strengthen and promote communities of all sizes. The town is 33 years old, right? So 30 of those years we've been members of the National League of Cities. Second item is we're going to honor somebody who's very special with a proclamation, and I'll read the proclamation and then we'll get together in the front. This is a Town of Farragut proclamation. Whereas the Milken Family Foundation awards only 40 educators in the country with the Milken Educator Award, known as the Oscar of Education. And whereas Milken Award recipients must meet very specific criteria, and whereas Milken works with state departments of education during a year-long process to determine who receives the award, and whereas on December 4th, 2012, this prestigious award was presented to Bobby King, third grade teacher at Farragut Intermediate School, and whereas she is the only teacher in Tennessee to receive the prestigious honor, now therefore I, Ralph McGill, Mayor of the town of Farragut, do hereby proclaim tomorrow, January 11th, 2013, as Bobby King Day in town of Farragut. And I urge all citizens to join me in honoring Bobby King for her dedication to her students and community. Come on down.
Any chair you like.
When people aren't here.
Yeah.
Hey, All right, the next item is citizens forum. Do we have anybody signed up?
No, sir.
Okay, the next item is approval of minutes from the December 13th, 2012 meeting.
I'll make a motion for approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We go to business items, approval of resolution R 2013-01, appointment of town of Farragut municipal judge.
Yes, sir. In accordance with the Town of Farragut Municipal Code, Section 3-102, the office of municipal judge shall be filled by resolution of appointment by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Any person appointed to the office of municipal judge shall hold a bachelor's degree from an accredited college or university, should be at least 30 years of age, and have been a resident in the town for a period of 1 year preceding the election to office. The normal term in office for any officer appointed pursuant to Section 3-105 shall be for 1 year, and such officer shall continue to serve thereafter until such officer's successor has been appointed and is sworn in unless otherwise provided. Lucinda Troyer, the current municipal judge, has agreed to serve another term. No other applicants have applied for this appointment. The motion is to approve resolution R-2013-01, appointing Lucinda Troyer as the Town of Farragut municipal judge for 1 year. And she is here.
Any discussion?
Motion to approve. Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thanks, Judge.
The next business item is approval of contract for information technology services.
Thank
Did
you, Mayor.
everybody get one of these?
No, that's for you to sign later.
Oh, okay.
That's the clean copy. In your packets tonight is an agreement between the town and Claris Networks for professional information technology services. The agreement was negotiated after the town solicited proposals in accordance with our purchasing regulations, which identified Claris as the most qualified firm. In addition to being the most qualified, Claris Networks proposed the lowest cost for services of the three responding firms and has been the town's consultant for information technology services for 6 years. Per the terms of the agreement, the town will pay Claris Networks not more than $7,240 per month for services rendered, plus a one-time $6,442 lump sum fee for existing network upgrades. The agreement term is 3 years. The town attorney and I negotiated the agreement with Dave Saygraves of Claris Networks, who is here tonight representing Claris. You can find the scope of services, attachment B, in the packet, and it kind of gives a little more of a layman's description of what's going to be provided by this contract. It's a very complex, technologically term-filled contract, so I would recommend you take a look through that and do your questions from there. Otherwise, I'll defer to Dave for the technological stuff. We recommend the board approve the agreement as proposed, and I will take any questions you may have.
What's the total cost?
The total cost, well, the monthly cost is $7,240 per month, which comes out to, should be right on the front of the memo.
Is that basically one FTE?
I'm sorry,
Is that basically one FTE?
FTE.
Full-time employee.
Well, we do have an IT, a full-time IT employee. But if you look at the scope of services, this delves very deep into the network issues, into hosting our information, archiving our information, making sure that we're in compliance with the TCA when it comes to having public information and networking services in municipality. Those are things that for an organization like ours, being small, it's more cost effective to farm these types of projects out than to try to do them in-house. So the infrastructure cost for us would be pretty big.
Yeah.
Plus, we'd have to build in redundancy, archiving,
So there's
security
somebody-
systems.
There's somebody sitting here every day, right?
We do have an IT employee that kind of acts as, or being trained to be our CIO and we'll be working with Claris on and their project manager to make sure that we're executing this contract properly.
All right.
But we do have a full-time person here for IT, yes.
And Gary, are they paid out of this contract some?
No, sir.
Okay, so that's our person.
That is our person, correct.
Notice,
Right.
Gary, there was a comment in here about the number of users and the monthly fee on that.
Right.
How many users do we anticipate right now and then over the next duration of this contract?
I think right now we have approximately 45. I'm not sure offhand, and it changes, you know, as people come and go. So, and that's why it's nice to have that built-in function, because every month Claris will audit and see how many users had actually used, and that's why I put in the language that says not to exceed the 7240 per month. So that would be the cap, 50 users.
And is that pretty standard for this type of contract to have a user number escalating by cost?
I don't know if it's standard or not. I like it personally, but I'll defer to Tom or to Dave if that's a standard IT contract. I did a lot of research on the best practices with this, which is we I think had this. We had the RFP and all the proposals back in July, August, and as you may recall, we deferred it a couple times on this agenda just to make sure we got everything right. So we did a lot of research on how to deliver IT services, how it's going to relate to our existing e-government services and our future e-government services. So you know, and as you know, with IT, it's a train that you jump on at some point, and you know, you're always going to have to keep upgrading. So it's better to have this farmed out. But again, I'll defer to Dave for any technical questions about the contract, or Tom.
How long have we had a relationship with Claris? I know we've been with them for a while.
I think 6 years, maybe a little more. RM. Claris has been our IT consultant in providing these same services. The term of that previous contract is in month to month. So that's why we decided to go back out and check prices. Fortunately, they came back as the best and lowest provider.
And this is 3 years, I understand. Is that
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Ordinarily, when we have a competitive bid like this, we have the other bids in the package, so we don't see that here.
Right. As you can tell, it's a pretty large file. I didn't think it was necessary to have them in there. It was the differences between the companies were pretty good. And you know, in my opinion, when going through this stuff, it's better to have a deliberative process, which we outlined in the RFP, of how we're going to select the most qualified provider. We went through that process, and they clearly were the best provider. So there wasn't even a question of whether it was going to come down to the different services. And a lot of times when you're talking about the contract stuff and choosing the most qualified bidder, if you're looking at like construction, like items, service items, stuff you would order instead of services, I think it needs to be a little different, and you need to kind of tweak it. With help me here, Tom, with the
Dave, if you don't mind, just stepping to the podium so we can get you on the record. Thanks.
But the commercial
Complexity.
aspect of it between services and actual items differs with the contract. So as like with Darryl coming here with a bid for providing X tons of stone, you may have different amounts and based on a formula. These services are broad, a little more conceptual, and are kind of in a different realm, in my opinion.
They're a little more like professional services than the usual things. But there was a bid. There was a request for proposals, and I think there were three.
3 responding bidders.
And I think one of the factors that played somewhat heavily in favor of this particular submitter was the fact that they knew our system, they knew what we needed, and so they've already been kind of on the scene here to some extent. That didn't mean that the contract negotiation was easy. As Dave will tell you, it was just the nature of the subject matter. You can read this contract and tell. I mean, it was a bear to get our arms around it. But
I
I think we
Tom
got somewhere.
represented the town's interests very well. This is a very complex way. We mix hardware, which you would typically go out and procure, with services. That's all combined in the way we deliver it to the town, and it represents a cloud computing model. So the town has utilized this for a significant amount of time. Now I think we're doing it right in the way that we're contracting for these services. So I can't imagine the hours these two have put into trying to discern and disseminate all that we do, very technical things, and the legal garbage we have to have, frankly, to protect ourselves. So hope that helps. We're really combining two different things, not just the hardware assets that the town needs to run their business for the next 3 years, but all the services and support and all the guys that take phone calls to fix problems when the folks in the office need them. So.
Okay, I had a couple questions on page 4. This caused me a little bit of concern that it almost paragraph 14, A and B, that the contractor may assign or transfer any interest in this agreement without obtaining prior written approval of the client. Kind of tells me that we don't even really know who we're working with. We don't have any control over that, which causes me a little bit of concern.
Well, that was a hotly negotiated point. The reason that's in there is because Claris is a pretty substantial company, and size-wise, and big companies frequently get acquired, and I think Dave legitimately did not want to have a situation where we had a contract here that would have prevented him from being acquired if someone wanted to acquire his assets and assign the contract. But if you notice, the contract has a provision in it as part of that same paragraph that says that if they do assign it, they can only assign it if the acquiring entity assumes all the obligations under the agreement, and Claris is not released from its obligations under the agreement. So, there is some possibility of an acquisition. I doubt, as big as Claris is, that they're going to get acquired by somebody that isn't pretty substantial, if that were to happen. But Dave, you want to address that?
Yeah, I have two partners that own the business with me, so I can address any questions about this topic, and I'm happy to have nothing to hide from you guys. We went through a round last year of funding for our business. That happened to run cross-section with these discussions and negotiations. I knew we were looking at taking on outside investment to fund our growth strategy. I just could not sign that contract. So I think we met in the middle with a provision that allowed you guys to get comfortable with the ability to allow us to assign should that happen. We chose not to do that from a growth strategy standpoint. We operate the largest company in Tennessee doing what we do. We all happen to live in Knoxville. We have offices in Chattanooga and Nashville, and we have almost 85 employees. So we are, I think, substantial in what we do. So I think our desire, however, was to meet in the middle with some things we couldn't live without, and I think Tom met well, to serve your interests. So.
I think, and I understand that. I think subparagraph A and B both say that you guys can stick anybody in here pretty much that you feel like. And I know, as a contractor myself, most any contractors that I have working for me have good crews and bad crews, and we get comfortable working with a certain group or a certain team or a certain crew, and we may know that we're not going to have those same results with a different team. We like to have some control over that, and typically our contracts don't allow that, a clause like this. So that causes me some concern.
Could I speak to that?
Yes.
I appreciate that point, and I do understand that. We utilize technologies that are provided to us by third parties. So an example of this would be antivirus software. I contract with a company out of California for that. If they aren't the best subcontractor for me, I reserve the right to go get you a better product that I will deliver to the town as part of the solution we provide. I take all of that risk and liability as the entity delivering that service. So I really need this provision to be able to operate our business in a manner that's appropriate to deliver current technical solutions, to our clients. So I think it is similar, but I think it is a bit different in how we deliver the service that we provide. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking in terms of boots on the ground here, in the
Yeah.
in the towns and support people and whatnot.
Sure. 95% of the support we do for the town is remote. We log into computers. It's from our call center that's off, paper mill. Most of the work that we do comes out of that call center. When we do, have boots on the ground, it's typically for a consulting type of arrangement where we're working with David or Gary on a strategic initiative that's software related or growth related for something the town's doing.
Okay, thank
I
you.
think the ultimate protection for the town is that if things aren't going well, we have the right to terminate the contract. If the services are not being provided the way they've been contracted to be provided, we have a right to terminate I'm not even sure it's for cause. I think
Tom beat me up on this one
180 days.
consistently until he got what he wanted.
What's
what
that? I'm sorry.
Tom did not relent on this point. I pushed back pretty hard, and we gave a lot of ground here. So we feel very comfortable that we're going to serve you guys. If you're not happy with the arrangement, you have the ability to make other arrangements for these areas.
It's without cause, 180 days notice.
Yeah, and we needed at least 180 days because it's not easy to
Move all this stuff.
move all this to somebody else. So we felt like anything shorter than 180 days was unrealistic, and we might. Of course, they've got the 180-day right too. So either party can terminate in that event.
We only fire bad clients, though, not good clients.
Good.
Well, we hope we're good clients. So Gary and David, you guys your people are going to be interfacing with this. You're familiar with these folks, and you're comfortable with these terms.
Well, I know that Gary and Tom have been working on this for months now, trying to get all of this worked out, and I feel very confident that we have the best contract for both us and, in working with our contractor in Claris. They've been working with us for years now. They know our system. They know what we do. We hired a new individual this year that is typical for the town, doesn't just do IT, but also does GIS and a lot of the mapping that we're doing now. And so he is getting worked into this and learning our system so that we can have somebody here in-house. But they do so much stuff when it comes to the back end and making sure our email is working, that we don't have people getting our system and stealing all of our money out of our accounts and things like that. I mean, there's some serious stuff that I'm sure they see more of and we don't even know about. But it's important that we have that. And I think, as Gary mentioned earlier, having a contract at this point for us makes a lot more sense than having somebody in-house to do this type of service, because it takes a lot of work and a lot of money to get all of this going up front. So I feel confident that we have a good contract here, and certainly we'd recommend approval of it.
Okay. Well, that answers my concerns. Thank you.
I'd like to move for approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Now we go to ordinances, and there's a bunch of them. First one is for second reading, and this is ordinance 12-18, ordinance establishing a community health council. We've seen this once before.
Right, yes, sir, Mayor. This is just second reading, and this is a ordinance to develop a community health council that will be run by the Knox County Health Department. The city of Knoxville and Knox County are both developing and approving this very similar ordinance that we are in developing this council. We'll have representatives on the council that will be appointed by the board, one member from the board and one member by the mayor. And that council, I know, is getting up and running here in the next couple of months. So we're looking forward to getting some folks on the board and seeing what kind of advice they give us on how to be healthy here in Knox County. So we would certainly recommend your approval of this ordinance.
I'd be happy to make a motion to approve this ordinance 12-18.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Now we go to first reading on several ordinances. First one is ordinance 12-19, ordinance on first reading to amend the Farragut zoning ordinance, chapter 4, general provisions and exceptions by adding section, what is that? 29. Grand opening special events permit.
This ordinance is kind of the grand slam part of the amendments that have come before you. From the standpoint, it's the fourth of this. I can't say the three-legged stool because it's the fourth, so that's where I came up with the grand slam idea. But in essence, this is part of working with our local businesses to make their endeavor into business easier. You know, the Costco's and the JCPenney's and the big stores like that, they make a big splash in the media when they are opening, but the vast majority of our businesses in town are the small businesses. And purchasing a grand opening sign that can only be used once is really a financial hardship, particularly when they're opening. There's always little things that are constantly coming up that create a financial strain on a business. And so the goal here was to create an ordinance where the town would actually be the ones to purchase the signs, and the sign that is up there before you is our rezoning sign. And the reason I included this in this is because this sign that with the grand opening will have the dark blue background like that and the white lettering, and as you can see, that really pops and is very visible, but it also kind of creates a brand from the fact of that it is blue and white, with Admiral Farragut's colors for the schools, and that businesses would be able to pay a security deposit for the sign and then use the sign for their grand opening. This ordinance allows for a 32 square foot sign versus the 20 square foot sign. They would also be able to have it out for 20 days versus 10 days with the standard special event. And they could also use their regular special event sign during that time frame. And we all know that for a business, good customer service and not large signs is what's key to success for any business. But our goal is to give them some additional publicity so that they have an opportunity to showcase their product and their customer service, which will in turn bring back repeat customers. The signs will be just like the special event permit signs, that there'll be a minimum of 10 millimeters corrugated plastic, affixed to studded T-posts, maximum mounting height of 6 feet, 20-foot setbacks from edge of pavement, and 10-foot setback from driveways. Again, the difference is this does not count toward their regular special event. This helps the businesses get their information out that, hey, we're open now. And by using this type of sign, more or less branding it, that if someone sees that sign, it's like, oh, that's one of those grand opening signs. I'm going to check out what's going on in this center and see what business is new here. And so the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of ordinance 1219, and staff also recommends approval of this ordinance.
I think it's also worth noting, Ruth, tell me if I'm wrong, but this was initiated by the Farragut Business Alliance. And
Yeah,
they're
they
very
had-
supportive of this.
Yeah, we actually held a public meeting on October 11th with that the Farragut Business Alliance and the town hosted to get input from folks, because after Einstein Bagels opened, they said, it would have been nice if there could have been just a little bit more pizzazz to say, hey, yes, we are now open. Now, we give the permanent sign permit as soon as somebody gets a building permit. So, for example, Publix isn't open and is opening next week, but they've had their permanent wall sign up for a while, so people know that's the Publix. But aside from the fact that's a larger business anyway, so just like Einstein Bagels, their sign was up for a while. The idea with the grand opening sign is, okay, now we're open, come visit us. And that way kind of give that extra pop for them. Can be out for 20 days. They can have that extra signage, and folks will start recognizing the blue and white sign and say, oh, there's a new business open, let's check it out.
Just to reinforce one point, and that is, this is not the wording for grand opening, right?
No, it's just to show you what the sign, that the blue by having a dark blue background, because when we had the meeting we hosted with the FBA, that was a big discussion. What color do we make it? And if you remember, our shop Farragut signs have a white background, and at the Planning Commission we discussed that extensively. We opted to go with the reverse, and we did this also for our rezoning signs because the white lettering pops on that blue, and you can see it. It's very legible, and that's kind of our goal with the new grand opening signs.
How many last year did we have business grand openings that would have fit this criteria of ballpark figure?
I couldn't even begin to hazard a guess, but we have a lot more grand openings than you realize, and that's part of this program. Some of the businesses, they just kind of had soft openings, and then after they were open for a few weeks would use their special event permit to get started. Some of them would use all their special events permits at once to get the word out, hey, we're here, kind of thing. And so just different strategies. I don't really have any idea. I should, because I put how many new signs. I would say probably based on the sign permits that we issue for new businesses, I would guess in the neighborhood of 50 to 60.
I like the idea of helping the smaller business. I was curious with the volume, the impact on having the staff to keep up with all of this in terms of some of the guidelines that are in this policy.
You make a good point, and you'll be hearing from me in a few weeks.
Okay. So I take that to mean that there are some staffing questions on this, or how?
It's kind of one of those things where you constantly throw a penny into the jar, and you continue to throw the penny in the jar, and pretty soon the jar's full, and you can't continue to throw pennies in. So it's that kind of thing.
I think it's also good to note that the grand opening sign is going to be about 60% larger than this, because this is 4 by 5, and the grand opening sign will be 4 by 8. Is that correct?
Yes. Actually, that sign's just 2 by 3, or 2 by 2 or whatever. It's not a very big sign, but our general special events permit is just 20 square feet.
Yeah.
And this one is the 32 square feet, so that it is a little bigger, so that kind of helps.
I had one question, Ruth. Is a 20-foot setback from the edge of the pavement? Just curious at how we came up with that, because it seems like that'd be way back.
It's actually not very far back, and how we came up with that is that's also what we do. That's what's required with the special events. When you're pulling out of a driveway, if you get closer than that, you create a sight distance problem.
Okay.
So that's where we went with the edge of pavement because nobody knows where their property line is, their front property line in particular. So by saying the edge of pavement, it's really easy to go out there and say, here's the edge of pavement. I go 20 feet back, and that's where I can put the sign.
Well, 20 feet back is going to put it in the middle of a lot of parking lots, I think, because a lot of times
Not with the right-of-way, because that's from the edge of pavement, not from the edge of the right-of-way, and that's where the difference is. Because your edge of right-of-way is, generally speaking, it can range anywhere, but on Kingston Pike and roads like that, your edge of the right-of-way can be about 15 feet away from your front property line. Noah's nodding.
There might be a few older developments that where the parking lots are within or close to the edge of the right of way.
Yeah.
They just have to find a spot where they can slide over to the landscape island.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion for approval.
Well, I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Next ordinance is also first reading, ordinance 12-20, ordinance on first reading to amend Farragut zoning ordinance, chapter 4, general provisions and exceptions, section 13. Do we have to use Roman numerals?
Sorry about that. That was established before my time.
Section 13, outdoor lighting, site lighting to establish wall-mounted light heights and required glare shields.
This amendment was initiated by the Planning Commission when we were workshopping the 4-story business district. And the idea was that if you have a taller building, your wall-mounted lights can be mounted taller than what we traditionally see on our shorter buildings. This light right here, for example, is between 12 and 15 feet in actually about 12 and 10 to 12 feet in height. And the idea is that if we're going to allow taller buildings, is that we should limit the mounting heights of the wall lights. And it was decided that 15 feet, since that tends to be about the average of what most buildings have been mounting their lights on, is that it would be, and that would accommodate lighting the building entrances, adjacent walkways, but it would limit the negative glare onto adjacent properties and rights-of-way. The second aspect of this ordinance was actually staff initiated, and I figured since we were coming before to amend this section of the zoning ordinance, I would bring this up. We've had some, for example, Costco very willingly put glare shields on their lights, and that's an example of a glare shield. It's this metal piece that actually hangs around the sides and the back in this particular light. And what it does is when for example, Powell Acres neighborhood is located behind the Costco, and whenever your parking lot is at an elevation that's above the neighborhood, even though the lights meet our requirements, they actually create a real negative glare on the adjoining property owners. And Costco did that on the front end. Right now we've been dealing with neighbor complaints with the Publix because their lights do create some real negative glare, and it's the same kind of situation where the residents are located below the parking lot. And it's always a good idea to let folks know on the front end if we anticipate a problem. And we did anticipate that problem with Costco, and they took care of it voluntarily, and Publix is now looking at it. So this second aspect of the amendments would require these exterior glare shields when adjacent to residentially zoned property that's located below the parking lot elevation. The idea is that when someone is going through with their site plan and everything, and they're including everything, they know on the front end that they are going to need to add these glare shields, exterior glare shields, to protect the adjacent residential properties. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of Ordinance 1220, and staff also recommends approval of this ordinance.
Okay, just as a matter of curiosity, it seems like the lower a light is, the more away from the building it has to be pointed to light a given area. The higher it is, the steeper the angle would be, and the less glare there would be, the harder it would be to shield, the easier it would be to shield that glare to surrounding areas. Am I missing something, or?
We're not talking about the height of the pole lights.
I know, I'm talking about building a wall-mounted light. That's what we're talking about, right? It's wall-mounted.
No, the glare shields are for pole lights.
Well, but the mounting height of wall lights should be limited to 15 feet. That's what I'm talking about.
Right. That actually, the lower the height, the better it is for reducing the glare. From the standpoint of when you get it too high, then you're more likely to see that light source. As we age, our eyes don't have the ability to readjust, and it's like when you look at a light and you look away, the older we are, the longer it takes to when you don't see that spot anymore. And so the lower light actually creates, the lower height light on the wall actually creates less problems. With regards to the pole lights, we have a maximum height, and basically what we're just saying is if you back up to a residential area,
yeah, I'm good with that. I'm just concerned about the wall-mounted lights. Noah, you've looked at this, I'm sure. What's your feelings on that?
Really, our thought on the wall-mounted lights was that was to try to eliminate the glare. And you got to there's a difference between glare and illumination. In kind of a rule of thumb that Ruth and I have used over the years, and there's even been times where I had unintended glare, but the rule that we've used is that if you can see the bulb when it's illuminated, then that's glare. But just the ambient light itself is not glare, that's illumination. I'm probably not using the right electrical engineering term, but if you can see, the rule is if you see the bulb, then that's the glare. That's the actual intensity of the bulb itself.
Right.
And we felt like that if you needed to illuminate a parking area, you would do that with a pole. If you wanted to illuminate next to the building, we felt like that 15 feet was sufficient to be able to illuminate sidewalks and things like that, because you're really not trying to illuminate the parking lot with a wall-mounted light.
Okay, that makes sense.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Kind of explain it?
Yeah,
okay.
That helps. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ruth, it was mentioned here about the Powell Acres residents with Costco. I'm curious, since that's been up for a little bit of time, have we heard any more from the Powell Acres residents relative?
Oh, they're thrilled. Costco has been great for them, working with them. they had some concerns that we worked with on the front end and got those addressed with regards to the drainage way and the lighting and everything. And whenever we brought things to the contractor's attention, which was Gray Construction, they were fantastic to deal with. They took care of it.
So this glare lighting took care of that issue
Mhm,
that was addressed
mhm.
by them at the time.
Yes.
And we probably assume the same thing will hold for the folks by the Publix complex.
They're working on it. Their style of light's a little bit different because of the angle, so I really like the glare shield there's a lot of different styles of glare shields. I like the one that Costco has. You can't see it on this picture. I took that picture today. It's too cloudy to really see it, but it actually kind of comes around on the sides also. And in the Publix, the lights that are backing up to the neighborhoods are actually like this. So if you put it in the back, you're still going to have the problems over here. So I know that they're looking at that, and so there's a lot of different styles that can accommodate those concerns. That I'm not worried about that. No matter what kind of style you use it, there will be a product out there.
Great.
I'd like to make a motion for approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next one is ordinance 12-21, ordinance on first reading to amend the Farragut zoning ordinance, chapter 4, general provisions and exceptions. Section 1, accessory structures to require HVAC screening to be architecturally compatible, and to rename the section to accessory structures and uses.
The first portion of this amendment was again initiated by the Planning Commission during the discussion of the four-story business district. The idea here is that you have that whenever you're building a building, you plan ahead and you screen these units. I'm pretty sure that whenever they built this building, they took a lot of care with the creativity and the design, with the arched windows and the cornices and everything. They really weren't anticipating, because I can guarantee that architectural rendering that they were given didn't include the large HVAC units sitting on top of the roof. And so the idea is that we currently require the HVAC screening to be opaque, but that it does not necessarily have to be architecturally compatible. Now you can just barely see that there's a little line. That's why I took this picture. That HVAC unit is actually screened behind that cornice of that building. And so that's our goal with this, is that it's planned on the front end that you get that screening. And again, here you can't see it, but that's where that unit is behind that building, and then right here is where the unit is not adequately screened behind the cornice. And so the Planning Commission opted that as part of the four-story building, and just in general, that the screening not just be opaque but also be architecturally compatible. The second portion of this amendment deals with the title of the section, accessory structures, and to rename it to accessory structures and uses. And this stems back to the screening of the HVAC units. A ruling was requested, a determination was requested at the Board of Zoning Appeals. The Board of Zoning Appeals concurred that staff did not err in the application of the zoning ordinance with regard to the HVAC units needing to be screened. But in order to, in case someone were to decide whether they felt that HVAC unit was an accessory use versus an accessory structure, that be not the question, because the ordinance was very clear in that HVAC units are to be screened. And so that we would change the section name to accessory structures and uses. And then the final amendment was just the addition of the term compactors when dealing with garbage dumpsters and recycling containers. We have always interpreted the ordinance that way, and just so that just to clarify for folks, as we are making amendments to a section, if there's something that needs to be further clarified, we try to do that. And the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of ordinance 1221, and staff also recommends approval of ordinance 1221.
So this applies going forward to anybody, not just the four-story
Right. If you've had a site plan that's already approved, it would not apply. It would just be the opaque requirement. But if someone comes in, once this is approved at second reading and the ordinance has been published, and site plans come in, then they would be required to be screened with architecturally compatible. And we actually talked with an architect about this, and he said that it's really one of those things where it's their job to make sure that the screening meets it and that they take the care to look at that on the front end. And he said that, they just have to look at what is your ground elevation and then what's your roof elevation and measure accordingly. One of the things that we talked about at the Planning Commission meeting is with the new higher energy units, you need to take that extra height into consideration. And a lot of buildings will do a penthouse if they're going to do a roof type structure. Or if they do a ground mounted structure, it's a lot easier from the standpoint of retrofitting after the fact. We kind of have it split with whether we see ground units or roof type units.
What about, does this doesn't seem to address in any way, accessory storage buildings. Is that addressed in our, in this section at all?
We do not we address that from the standpoint they have certain setback requirements and they have certain height limitations, but we do not require them to be architecturally compatible. That, we do require really the primary accessory structure that we see are dumpster enclosures, and those are already required to be architecturally compatible. So in essence, this puts this in the same playing field level, whatever you want to call it, as the dumpster enclosures.
Okay, but I just know of an issue we had in town of an accessory storage unit. It was a portable unit that was set next to behind a shopping center.
Well, a portable unit isn't allowed either way. They have to be permanent structures. So having an accessory structure, then it would have to be a permanent structure, meet all the building codes, be affixed to the ground, that kind of thing, and have the footers and, meet all the building code requirements. And those are allowed. Obviously, it just has to be a permanent structure.
Okay. I'll make a motion for approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next one is ordinance 1222, ordinance on first reading to amend the Farragut zoning ordinance, chapter 3, specific district regulations, section 16, reserved for, lost the place, future use to create a new commercial zoning district entitled Business District 4-Story, BD-4.
This is a request brought to us by the Myers Brothers Holdings, and they are the owners and developers of the Renaissance development. And they wanted a new commercial zoning district created to allow for a 4-story building with reduced setback requirements. One of the things that we have talked about over the years is that if you require all your buildings to meet a larger setback, then it's kind of you mandate that the parking lots be located in the front of the building. And so we have made changes over the years with our zoning ordinance. Like, for example, when I first started work here, the front yard setback was 100 feet. Well, if you have a building setback of 100 feet, your parking lot will always be in the front. And over the years, we kind of fine-tuned that and tweaked that to reduce that requirement so that we could get buildings constructed closer to the roads. This particular district is purposely intended to be closer to the road, with the parking lots either in the side yard or in the rear yard. We've already talked about some of the other amendments this evening that kind of went hand in hand with the creation of this new zoning district. But the Planning Commission talked about what I was just talking about, with encouraging parking lots to be somewhere other than in the front of the building, and reducing the setback creates more flexibility for creative design. And so those were the positives that we really were embracing with this new zoning district. Some of the concerns and issues that were discussed at the Planning Commission dealt with creating a canyon effect along the roads, that the buildings would be taller and too close to the right-of-way, having the power lines closer to the building edges and limiting the planting of shade trees and that sort of thing. and just how would this affect future roadway improvements. We talked about it extensively about this, and what we came up with is at a suggestion of a citizen was to use the golden ratio or the golden mean. I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to Google this, but that is a 1.618 is the number. Actually means absolutely nothing, and when the citizen said something to me about it, I was like, why is this familiar? And then I was like, oh yeah, this is the advantages of having your son live with you when he's going through getting his master's in math education, because he was very interested in that because he's also an artist type. And what that is it's a mathematical equation that creates a visual balance in the ratio. And it was suggested that we needed some flexibility, but we also wanted to keep that where it was attractive from the standpoint we didn't want the canyon feel. And Kingston Pike is a 100-foot right-of-way, but realistically the travel ways are only 60 feet. With the center turn lane and 4 travel lanes, there's only 60 feet of pavement. So rather than regulating just from the front property line, we regulate from the edge of pavement. And so the edge of pavement would include if you have deceleration lanes or something like that, which would most often be triggered by the development itself. And then also bike lanes, and using that as the determination of the setback. So you take the building height and you divide that by 1.618, and that would determine how far the building had to be set back from the edge of pavement. But the minimum setback, however, would remain 20 feet from the property line. Doing this created the flexibility that we all were looking for to solve the issues that we had some concerns that were discussed at the meeting. I checked with Darrell Smith with regards to roadway improvements and things like that, and it's already in the Knoxville Regional Mobility Plan that we will see Kingston Pike 5-lane between Smith Road and Campbell Station Road. Knowing that, we need to think ahead with regards to that, but that's the only section of Kingston Pike that's designated for widening. In addition, it's best to assume that we're going to have bike lanes constructed all over on our collectors and arterials. That doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be a major road widening project, because with the newer engineering standards that you follow, you can have reduced lane width, restriping, and using some of that pavement. And then there's so accommodating that actually isn't as big as issue as your gut reaction may be on the front end with that. The other aspect of this ordinance, other than the fact that the buildings can be taller, but also that they would have to be constructed, 75% of it would have to have face brick, and that the uses that are allowed are more restrictive. There would be less. You wouldn't have outdoor sales and storage. You wouldn't have gas stations. You wouldn't have drive-through windows, service lanes, windows for restaurants. You would still have, you could have outdoor seating for restaurants, but you wouldn't have the drive-through. So you would have the bulk of the uses would be concentrated interior to the building. So with the addition of the added bulk of the building and with the restrictive uses, it makes it very compatible for adjacent residential uses to have this as a neighbor. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of this new BD4 district, and the staff also recommends approval of it.
I'm going to be redundant with comments that I made at the Planning Commission, but first of all, I want to thank again the Myers Brothers for bringing this concept forward, and staff for working with them. You know, we've talked a lot about having a unique identity and brand for our community, and this is part of that. The other thing I'll plant a seed with the other members of this board, I think there's great potential for this zone on the north side of the interstate when the time comes that we begin looking at the development of the Outlet Drive extension. I just see great opportunity there. So, but this is really good. It was great discussion. I think we've ended up with something here again that's really going to help continue to set our community apart.
Well, and I want to second Ron's comments. I'm just glad to see us thinking outside of the classic suburban sprawl oceans of asphalt in front of buildings concept, and getting a little bit creative and a little bit thoughtful with it. So I acknowledge the effort that's gone into this, and look forward to seeing it come to fruition.
I had a question along the lines of looking at some of the existing front parcels we have throughout town, and if we have some more four-story buildings that maybe aren't on land that's quite the design and dimension of Mr. Meyer's property, I was concerned about, is there any discussion about blocking businesses that are behind one of these four-story buildings, or their visibility relative to if you put one of these in a parcel and it's blocking, or it somehow diminishes visibility for those behind it? I was just curious if that came up at all, or what the discussion might have been on that.
We did not talk about out parcel development at all, but I think at the time that rezonings come forward, it would be something that, as a landowner, they would consider as to whether they'd want a four-story building in front of it. In this particular case, yes, it is out front of the Renaissance development, but what's directly behind it is the detention basin and the creek, and there's not another business behind it. But we have numerous locations in town where there is out parcels, and to be honest with you, once you get past the first story, I don't think a four-story is going to make any difference than a one-story. In some ways, you could argue that the four-story would allow for greater visibility of the businesses behind it, because rather than being stretched out, you're elongated. So you got to accommodate the parking. I mean, we can't get around that. You got to accommodate the parking. So in essence, you're creating a more compact building where there's more parking, which allows that you can see through to the businesses that are behind it. That's my professional opinion from that. It is not something that we ever talked about at the Planning Commission. One of the things I did forget to mention is that it was decided that the parking lots would need to be screened, and that we said it'd be 60% of the parking lots when they front on the road, that they provide some kind of screening. We weren't real prescriptive on how that be accomplished. We decided to leave that creativity up to the designers with regards to that. So even if the parking lots are screened, you're still going to be able to see over them to see the businesses behind it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'd like to make a motion for approval.
I'd like to second that.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next one is ordinance 12-23, ordinance on first reading to rezone parcel 63, tax map 151, located in the southeast corner of Kingston Pike and Way Station Trail, part of the Renaissance development, approximately 2.5 acres, from rezoning from C1 General Commercial District to BD4 Business District, four-story. Myers Brothers Holding applicants.
This is to rezone the property, in essence, we've all been talking about, for this new four-story district. This is located at the entrance of Old Stage Hills subdivision, right on Kingston Pike. There were some residents that attended the planning commissions, Old Stage Hills residents that attended the planning commission during these discussions. Some of the concerns that they had really were concerns more at the time of site plan approval that really didn't have anything to do with the rezoning, and actually were going to be, doesn't matter whether it's zone C1, BD4, or whatever, were some of the issues. From a location for this particular zoning district, the zoning district provides for the buffer strip and a building setback of 100 feet from adjacent residential property. So the district itself creates some safety measures for the adjacent residentials. In addition, because this commercial district does have less exterior type outdoor type uses, the gas stations, the drive-through lanes for restaurants and that sort of thing, it actually makes it much more neighborhood friendly in that respect. The Planning Commission recommended unanimously in favor of this rezoning, and staff also recommends approval of this rezoning.
Question about mentioned about an unnamed stream there, and also given the steep terrain of at least part of that property, about water runoff when it had any heavy rain coming through there. Are we confident that that'll be cared for properly?
They actually over-detained the detention basin. If you look behind you, sorry about that, I can't point it here. The detention basin is located back in this area, And they actually over-detained in their detention basin in anticipation that when this develops, it would not have to detain the water on there because it all goes into that unnamed stream. The key is, though, they still will have to deal with water quality, the first flush aspect of it, and you know, they will be dealing with that. So we do not anticipate anything with regards to storm events that would create a problem with this site.
Thank you.
But I'll make a motion for approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That concludes with the ordinances. Now it's time for the town administrator's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one thing to report tonight, and earlier tonight we talked about the Oscar of Teachers Awards that was given to Bobby Keene in the proclamation that the mayor graciously handed to her. But we also have in our midst a celebrity who's won the Oscar this year for attorneys in the city of Knoxville and the Knoxville Bar Association. Recently, Mr. Hale won the Governor's Award, which is the Knoxville Bar Association's highest award that they honor to their esteemed colleagues, and it's given annually to an attorney who commands special respect from his peers, and it's given for the distinction and honor brought to the profession by enduring, faithful, and distinguished service in the community. So just wanted to make sure that the board was aware that Mr. Hale received that this year for his great work that he does.
So it sounds like what we suspected all along, we got a pretty good attorney.
I would think so.
Are rates going to change now?
Tom, do you want
Hopefully not.
You want a day? Do you want a day?
A day? No.
Let's just get him a sash.
I will say there was not a $25,000 check.
It was bigger?
It was non-existent.
Well, that brings us to your report.
I don't have any report tonight, unless you all have any questions for me.
Well, in that case, we're finished with the agenda and we are adjourned.